Propaganda, 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 news media, propaganda, 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 only for propaganda.
Welcome to the TFV Weekly News Report. Now, in this week's news, the UN Rights Office has said that at least 816 civilians were killed and 1,333 wounded in Ukraine up until March the 17th. Ukraine's defense ministry has said that Russia has lost a total of 14,200 servicemen since the invasion has begun. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry has reported a death toll only once, on the date March the 2nd, saying that 498 servicemen have been killed in Ukraine. Also, the New York Times reported on Wednesday the 16th of March that Russia has lost 7,000 soldiers in Ukraine. Now, obviously, clearly, it's quite difficult to gauge the truth from the fallacy due to the range and the various numbers that are being thrown out. They say numbers don't lie, but I guess that's not the case when they are made by humans for their own propaganda. There's a saying that in times of war, the truth is lost. Now, according to the UN, 3.1 million Ukrainians have fled the country and 6.5 million are displaced within the Ukraine. This Tuesday, the UK announced 350 new sanctions listed in its Russia sanctions regime, in addition to 9 new listings under its cyber sanctions regime. Also in the UK, households are being offered £350 a month to open their homes to refugees fleeing the war in Ukraine. Additionally, a combination of 45 large UK companies, including Sainsbury's, Marks & Spencer's, ASOS and Morrison's, are offering to employ Ukrainian refugees. Many people question why asylum seekers from other parts of the world have not received anywhere near this sort of treatment. For example, asylum seekers who have fled the Syrian civil war, the Somalian civil war, the civil war in Libya, the war in Afghanistan, Rwandan genocide, and the list can go on. Now, refugeeaction.org states that asylum seekers are banned from working and claiming benefits in the UK, and 76% of asylum seekers wait longer than 6 months for a decision on them to be legally recognised as a refugee, whereas these obstacles are quickly being bypassed for Ukrainians who are fleeing the war. In other news around the UK, a Metropolitan Police officer named David Carrick has been charged with a total of 41 offences, including coercive and controlling behaviour, rape and sexual assault. David Carrick was arrested by Hertfordshire Constabulary in October 2021 and was suspended. However, prior to his arrest, he was attached and served in the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, which is a unit of the police service which is responsible for providing officers to protect the Palace of Westminster that contains the Houses of Parliament. Now, this situation leaves me with just one question. How many more of them are there just like him that are currently on the police force? Now, another extremely disturbing story in the UK and involving the police. A 15-year-old black schoolgirl in the borough of Hackney was strip searched by 2 police officers in school whilst on her period after being taken out of her exam for being wrongly suspected of possessing cannabis. Teachers said that the child smelt of cannabis and decided to call the police. When she was strip searched, the young girl's private body parts were exposed and the female officers demanded that she remove her sanitary towel. This incident is currently under investigation.
They have neglected their duties and we no longer feel safe. And they feel they need to hide in the corner instead of admitting what they have done wrong. And that's the fact that they've neglected a poor child who has to be traumatized this way. And instead of apologizing and addressing, you know what, we've done wrong, we're going to do better. They want to hide, cruel and intimidate and say, you know what, be quiet, go to lesson. No, we're not going to go to lesson because we're not safe. And she's come out here and take responsibility for what she's done.
This vile act perpetuated upon the young girl by these officers has traumatized her. Her family has said that the teenager has gone from a happy-go-lucky girl to a timid recluse, now self-harming and in need of therapy. The young victim has stated that she can't go a day without wanting to scream, shout, cry, or simply give up. The teacher that called the police has now been sacked, but it would seem that this was a response to the protests which took place over the weekend. It has also been said that the victim is due to sue the Metropolitan Police. Now, what we really need to know is, first of all, why was the police called? Did the police have to get called? What do you think? When she was violated by the female officers, why was there no adult present? Why was she stripped on the premise that the teachers say they could smell cannabis on her, let alone being a 15-year-old girl in school? Now, this issue is deeper than police brutality or the police abusing their power. It's also an issue of how black children are viewed and treated within the school system in this country. Furthermore, would this have happened if she was a 15-year-old white girl? What do you think? What do you think should happen, and what do you think will happen? Now, heading over to West Africa, in Arbinda, a town in northern Burkina Faso, armed militants killed at least 8 people who were collecting water on Monday morning, bringing the total murdered in 3 days of violence within the area above 30. Arbinda have previously suffered several attacks and deadly raids by Islamist militants linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. In separate incidents in northern Burkina Faso, at least 15 people, including 13 military police officers, were killed in the Namentenga province on Sunday the 13th of March. And the day before that, on Saturday, 9 people were killed in an assault on an informal gold mine in the province of Udalan. Burkina Faso underwent a military coup earlier this year in January, where the previous president, Kabore, was forced out and is now put under house arrest, whilst the new president, Damimba, has vowed to secure the country from the ongoing violence associated to the Al-Qaeda and Islamic State group fighters. Earlier this week, Diabedo Francis Kere, an amazing architect hailing from Burkina Faso, became the first black person to win the Pritzker Architecture Prize, which is also known as the Nobel Prize of Architecture. Some of his most prominent works include London's 2017 Serpentine Pavilion, the Sabale Quay design for Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival, parliamentary buildings in Benin and Burkina Faso, the Consterior Pavilion in Germany, also the Centre for Health and Social Welfare in Burkina's Opera Village, which is actually a village in which he is also responsible for designing and is still under construction. Going towards the Horn of Africa, Somalia faces its third and most severe drought in the last decade. The United Nations warned on Wednesday the 16th of March that it faces a crippling lack of funds to tackle Somalia's devastating drought, which has been overshadowed by other humanitarian crises, including the war in Ukraine. But so far, the UN has only secured 3% of the 1.46 billion required to meet the needs of Somalis. Adam Abdemullah, the UN humanitarian coordinator for Somalia, told a press conference, "The situation is grave and is deteriorating rapidly," he said. The outlook was already grim prior to the outbreak of the Ukrainian crisis. We have been overshadowed by the crisis in Tigray, Yemen, and Afghanistan, and now Ukraine seems to suck all the oxygen that is in the room, he added. Like what Adam Abdemullah said, this situation is definitely dire and must not be ignored. Humanitarian organizations estimate that 1.4 million children, nearly half of Somalia's under 5 population, are likely to suffer from acute malnutrition provoked by the drought. Now, if we go down south to Zimbabwe, there's a potentially groundbreaking international case where a group called the Zimbabwe Anti-Sanctions movement on Friday has filed papers in the Gauteng High Court asking it to declare US sanctions against Zimbabwe unlawful, unconstitutional and invalid. The court application says that sanctions applied by the US on Zimbabwe prejudices ordinary Zimbabweans by denying the country access to international credit markets and by cutting off international aid and donor assistance. South African banks such as First Rand, Standard Bank and Absa are afraid to conduct business in Zimbabwe due to the risk of incurring civil and criminal penalties. The court application states South African financial service providers, as a result of the United States sanctions on Zimbabwe, have deprived Zimbabwean nationals and companies with money due to them and withheld financial services in order to comply with the unilateral economic sanctions imposed by the United States. US sanctions were introduced in 2001 under the Zimbabwe Democracy and Recovery Act with the purpose of restoring order in the country after state-sanctioned land invasions and human rights abuses. Now, a 2019 report by Zimbabwe's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade detailed the impact of these sanctions upon the local economy, saying that the restrictions had suffocated Zimbabwe's ability to meet its international financial obligations while denying the country critical balance of payments support. Zimbabwean importers are forced to pay cash up front. Loan inflows to Zimbabwean companies have dropped, and the country's agricultural output has fallen due to an inability to import farming equipment. The representative for the case, Simba Chitando, claims that sanctions have created instability in the region, with sometimes violent consequences, just like the recent emergence of populist gangs threatening to cleanse South Africa of Zimbabwean nationals in the country, is an unfortunate byproduct of unilateral sanctions upon Zimbabwe. Many Zimbabwean nationals risk danger in South Africa and live and work under precarious circumstances to avoid a Zimbabwean economy besieged by sanctions. This is the TFV Weekly News Report, and thank you.
Propaganda, 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 news media.